Hello, and happy Monday, September 8th. Our meditation today is on body image. So if somebody could just send me a quick chat and let me know that you can hear me, I would appreciate it, because this is always sort of a funny forum where I'm just talking into cyberspace. Okay, good. We have yes, the sound sounds great. So if you want to activate your video camera so I can see you, you're welcome to do that. If you have questions, you can chat them to me. And for now, we'll just forge ahead. So one of the things I would like for everybody to do is to take a brief moment to, if you would, you can either close your eyes or not, because I can't see whether you do or not, but just take a minute to plant your feet on the floor and really, let's do a quick body scan so we can start by knowing that we have a body, that we actually have impulses and sensations in the body, since we're going to be talking about our body and our body image. So if you would just gently close your eyes, put your feet on the floor so you can really feel the backs and bottoms of your feet and your toes on the ground. Notice your ankles and your shins. Notice if you're holding any tension in your calves or your knees. In any place you notice tension, just notice it and breathe into it so you can gently release it or not, but don't get distressed if you can't. And notice the tops of your thighs, which are big muscles, and the backs of your legs up against the seat. And if you're holding any tension there, we tend to hold tension in our quads and our hamstrings also. And then feel your seat up against whatever you're sitting on. Any tension in the back body. Notice your belly. Are you breathing into your belly or into your chest? See if you can soften the belly and release any tension that might be there also. And then traveling up to the chest, notice your heart. Any tension you might have in your shoulders. And then traveling down your forearms into your hands. And then notice the back of your neck. Notice your ears, your jawline. If you're holding any tension in your mouth or jaw, just gently let it go. Your cheekbones and your eyes. The area between your brows. Just breathe gently and imagine any tension you might be holding going up through the crown of your head. And when you feel like you're properly in your body, you can gently open your eyes. So our quotation from today says, "I accept my body as imperfect. It gives me breath and it gives me life. What matters most is how I carry myself, not how my body carries me." And so I've often thought about the body as a vehicle that we get to comport our souls and ourselves for this lifetime. And sometimes the body can feel unruly, it can feel uncooperative, it can have aches and pains. But this recognition that I am my body and my body is me is important, because for a long time, Western dualism separated us from our bodies as if it were something or some creature out there, as opposed to recognizing the mind-body connection that we now know. Certainly the New Age led the charge on this, led the way, and neuroscience has proven with multiple amounts of data that we are indeed a mind-body connection. So when we're born, we have a body first and foremost. We don't necessarily have a mind, because the mind is created in a social context in relation to others. We have all of the equipment to have a mind because we have a brain, but the connections from the brain down into the body are very elaborate and very real. So that as infants, we have a brain and we have a brain stem and we have a body, and we have the beginnings of the right hemisphere, which is starting to come to fruition by way of experience, typically with the mother who's the primary caregiver. So any kind of fear or anxiety that's happening in early infancy and childhood gets encoded right down into the body. And if we grow up in a dangerous household, then the mind and the body can disconnect in some ways. There's an uncoupling that occurs, and that can leave us feeling disembodied or depersonalized or shameful or disgusted about our body because we're not fully integrated. Body of Fantasy is our title here. So bodily ideals, although diverging wildly in different cultures and periods, challenge and judge every individual, even the seemingly beautiful. So recently, for those of you who are on Facebook, there was a photograph of an Australian model, I believe. I didn't pay close enough attention, but this beautiful young woman who posed for some photographs underwater in a bathing suit from a bathing suit designer. And these were meant to be fashion photographs of, promoting a bathing suit. And what the advertising agency did was to Photoshop her body down to a size 4 when she's actually a size 8. And she very courageously, revolted, and she posted the photographs of her actual body as the photographer took them. And she said, I'm a size 8, I'm not a size 4. And when you see the juxtaposition between her real body versus the Photoshop body, you see the difference actually between a woman and a young girl. And so our ideal of femininity has been relegated to something that is largely 20 years old and doesn't move from that position. So we have to be very, very careful about what beauty and our bodily ideal is for us, not in relation to the culture or how we are trained or thought that it's supposed to be. So I just want to remind all of you that if you have any questions, that you can text them to me, chat them to me, and I'll answer your questions as I go along. It makes this more interactive, and I certainly can't think of everything on this topic without some prompting or help from all of you. Also to remind you that if you have any questions about your sex, sexuality, or anything of that nature, you can always call CHS. We always have intake counselors on the line at 310-843-9902. And I'll just type that in for you in case you need it. So while such aesthetic standards can encourage healthy self-improvement, they often impair self-acceptance. And I think that couldn't be truer. There's a paradox always between how can I make my health and well-being optimal? And that might mean making my body, quote, better. Who knows? But, exercise and health is about longevity, and it's also about a quality of life. We're all going to die whenever we're going to die, and if we're lucky enough to live into old age, we may be living till we're 70, 80, 90, 100 years old today. The question is, how do you want to experience that aging process in this body, in the body that you got? So we now know that the more people move, the greater chances they have of being biomechanically functional over the lifespan. So improving your body because of health, because you care about yourself, because you want to be able to play and run and swim and do all those things as you age is fantastic. And if your body looks great as a result of that, that's sort of another, a cherry on the sundae. But when you make that the main event, that's when people start to get into trouble. So someone asked a question, how does this lack of self-acceptance influence how we engage in sex as a woman? Well, I think it's different for everyone. If you have a lack of self-acceptance about your body, you're going to feel shameful about having sex, so you might be covering yourself up all the time, or you might feel like you want to seek sex with a lot of different people in order to get validation about your sexuality because you don't believe it's good enough, which ends up being damaging to you also. So you cannot truly be free in your body, whether it is to wear an article of clothing, wear a certain kind of shoe, have sex with people, wear a bathing suit on a beach and enjoy the ocean and the sun, if you don't accept the body that you have, and to find a way to be in gratitude for what you do have. So I think one of the things that will help us with this matter is gratitude. Every day, if we are in gratitude for the bodies we have, we will move into self-acceptance. And there's this thing that women have, especially about, my legs aren't thin enough or tight enough, or my feet or ankles aren't this enough. And all you have to do is see a person on the street with a prosthetic or in a wheelchair with no legs to have that be put into perspective for you. And while I know that's sort of an old-fashioned way of motivating someone, it's sort of like the adage where people tell their children they have to eat food because small children are starving other places in the world, and the child doesn't relate to that because they're not hungry. Likewise, you might not relate to not having no legs because you do have them and you just hate your legs. But to really put something into context, and especially when we have so much strife and pain in the world with people at war and bombs going off and in our country, American soldiers coming home without limbs, we must really look at reality and put into perspective that we actually have the limbs and the body parts we have, and to be grateful for those. Someone writes, when I learned that a man who loves a woman can love her imperfections, it was helpful. I'm dating a 50-year-old man who sees beauty and wisdom in stretch marks, for example. And I would say that that is an absolute stamp of maturity, that sexual maturity comes when we are in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and we recognize that stretch marks and cellulite are a sign of someone who's lived a long life, and that we can actually be in acceptance of that because our own bodies aren't perfect, and we don't look the way we did when we were 20. And that's a part of self-acceptance, too, is maturing through the lifespan at every decade or every 5 years, just saying, wow, I don't look the way I used to look, and am I going to use that as a club against myself and beat myself up, or am I going to be in acceptance about it? And how do I hold the paradox of, well, I should really exercise and take care of myself so my body lasts longer and my partner finds me attractive and I feel attractive, versus I have to go have, multiple surgeries on my body in order to try and look 20 again when I'm really 50. Somebody asks, what about the person with a prosthetic leg? How do they deal with body image? Well, I think that is different for everybody, and I don't know how to answer that question. I would speculate that people who have lost a limb are in gratitude for their lives, so they wouldn't have it any other way. There's a young woman named Amy Purdy who was a championship or is a championship snowboarder who lost both of her legs, and she has an incredibly inspiring TED Talk. So if you Google TED Talk and you type in her name, Amy, I think it's Perdy, or you could, search for snowboarder with no legs. Her story is unbelievable, and what she did, I think she won, the Women's International Championship recently. I don't know if she had a silver or gold medal for snowboarding, and she's missing both of her legs. Someone writes, I think it's important for both partners to understand and accept their bodies. My partner is also older and fully accept my body as is. So yes, it can't be, and it's difficult if one person's dragging the other person along. So if I'm insecure about my body and I need my partner to validate me all the time, that's not going to be sexually attractive. And anybody's partner would start to feel turned off by that sort of neediness, that it's really our jobs to be in acceptance and in gratitude for our body parts, how our bodies operate, what phase of life we're in, and all of that, because then we communicate a sexual confidence. From Dallas, we have a question. How do you feel unwavering in your confidence with your body when your spouse is a porn addict and has an ideal that will never be what you look like? Well, I think that's a very, very painful situation to be in. And first of all, you have to consider that it's your spouse that's not functional, not you. That you are a living, breathing, attractive, willing human being. And if your partner is preferring pixelated images, digital images over you, he's got bigger problems than just desiring your body. This is somebody who's having an extreme amount of difficulty with actual intimacy and closeness. And so the digital images are a lot easier to deal with because he doesn't have to be relational, he doesn't have to face his own issues, and you have to decide whether you can tolerate being in a marriage like that or if you have to leave. Because if it starts to destroy your self-esteem, then I'm not sure what the value is in being in that type of marriage. When someone writes, I think your sexuality is your own, I think that's absolutely true, that you have to make your sexuality, your sexual responsiveness your own and your business, not somebody else's. And somebody asked a question, someone says, well, I was married to a man who compared me to porn when I was 20 years younger. It was awful. Of course. I mean, those women are all super young in large part, or they've been airbrushed in some ways, or their bodies just are what they are and they're not yours. And we've all probably figured out today that bodies are sort of like fingerprints and snowflakes. No two are alike. And one of the things our media tries to do, as they did with this supermodel in the bathing suit ad, is they try to whittle everybody down to the exact same body type. And no one has that body type unless they're really young, as it turns out, or they've preserved them perfectly over time. But even then, our tissue changes over time, our muscle structure changes over time. We can only fight gravity and aging so much. So how do we age gracefully, and how do we love the bodies that we have? And somebody was writing to the woman in Dallas, I think his porn addiction probably predates your relationship, and my guess is that would be true also. And we have another person chiming in saying it's definitely not about you. Someone from Hawaii is asking about anorexia. And so I want to come back to that. In New York, we have a chat. I used to identify a lot with my body when I was able-bodied. I was body self-confident. Nowadays, as a physically disabled person, I yet again identify with my body, but it's a sadder identification, like no more exercise. It's hard for physical disability after decades of able-bodiedness. It's a blast to self-esteem and sexual romantic self-identity. The illness I have is chronic, and on top of exercise, it's not doable. Any commentary, welcome. Thank you. So, Nikki, I would say that this is, a heartbreaking turn of events for you in your life, and you have to find a way to be in acceptance for what has happened to you and what life has brought you, because if you're not, you will suffer. And my best advice to you is to seriously consider some sort of meditation practice with a really good teacher. My understanding is typically that the Buddhist practices are really about non-attachment, and not making yourself your body or your anything for that matter. And then I would also encourage you to get involved with other physically handicapped people and find ways to see how other people have sex that are handicapped. The American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, that's a mouthful, it's aasect.org. Oh, I guess I can write it here, so let me do that. Offers a lot of, where'd it go? Well, it must be down there somewhere. They offer a lot of resources for people who are handicapped, and they're all about sexually educating people and helping people who have disabilities and all sorts of diversity issues so that everybody is included in sex and sexuality. So there's a question about sexual anorexia, I think. It just says anorexia, so I'm not sure. If you could type a more specific question about what you want to know about that, I'll do my best to answer it. From Denmark, you have to work on helping decontaminate his sexuality. I think this exercise is important, as Alexandra says, for your quality of life, but your sexual being is still intact, and I think that's true. I think when we compare ourselves to anybody, we're going to put ourselves in a one-down position and in a dangerous position because it starts to whittle away at our self-esteem. For me, as a woman in my 50s, I cannot compare myself to women in their 40s, 30s, or 20s, or I'll be miserable eternally. So if I just compare myself to my own personal best, am I doing my best for today to take care of myself? Am I grateful that I have the body I have for today? Because if I'm not in gratitude today, tomorrow it's going to be different and I will have missed today. And I promise you, whatever age you are, when you get older, 5, 10, 15 years, you're going to look back and say, what was I thinking? I'm sure when I'm 70, I'll be thinking, what was I thinking in my 50s that I thought my body was bad? So be grateful for what you have today.
Here's another great question.
Dealing with unresolved sexual abuse issues, for sure, as I have had to. I'm glad to say that I now enjoy sex for myself. I didn't think it was possible. And Mary Jane, that's a really beautiful thing to speak of, because when people are sexually tampered with in any way as children, they are horribly, their body is stolen from them. Your no is stolen from you. There's often a feeling of disgust and shame that accompanies the offense, and people carry that well into their adulthood unless they can unpack and unravel that sexuality. And when you come to a place of recognizing that it wasn't your fault, that you didn't do anything wrong, that you were a kid and somebody was abusing you, there's an enormous freedom in that, and that allows you to reclaim your sexuality. And in doing so, you're actually taking the abuse back from the abuser. So it's extraordinarily important to empower yourself out of having been abused sexually. In Denmark, this is written from Denmark, we are trying out a technique called handy sex, where we assist persons who are not able-bodied. Well, that's really great, and maybe if you have resources about that you can just type in so that the lady in New York can have those, that would be lovely. So the next point here on our slide is that while such aesthetic standards can encourage healthy self-improvement, I already talked about that, we have constant proof of our corporeal failings and our inevitably temporary and comparative successes. So it's true. We're always being shown where we're falling short, especially with pornography, if we're being held up against that. We're only going to be successful in looking great in moments. Just like we have moments of healthiness, moments of happiness, moments of wholeness, moments of feeling like we look good or feel good, nobody gets all of those things 24/7 because the human condition is extremely malleable. It shifts, it changes from one moment to the next. I know for myself, when I feel sick or have a cold, I feel like I'm 100 years old, which is very different when I'm feeling vital and engaged and I've been exercising a lot and I feel maybe 20 years younger than I actually am. So it's a state of mind-body, and our bodies are a state of mind-body. They're not just a body state where you're incredibly buffed, but you're internally lonely or miserable or disconnected. An exalted, unrealistic sense of one's bodily perfection cannot substitute for a realistic, healthy body image. So how do you get a realistic, healthy body image? Well, one would be to stop looking at fashion magazines, to stop comparing yourself to other people on any given day, to get in touch with your body, as we did with this brief body scan when we started, and also to really look at yourself naked in a mirror. And look at yourself from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. And stand in the mirror and say, I love myself. Or make eye contact with yourself and say, I love who you are. And, I love my hair. I love my eyes. I love my nose, my mouth, my skin, my arms, my breast, my belly, you name it. So if you can do that every day and notice what happens when you feel like you want to reject some part of yourself or you want to hate some part of yourself, just how much violence you're actually perpetrating on yourself when there's no one around, nobody's abusing you but you. And when you can start to work with those constructs internally and you can start to melt into loving every aspect of yourself, that's when you can start to have a healthy body image. I have had curly hair my entire life, and something happened 2 years ago where the curl fell out of my hair, and I started hating my hair. And I was in a real battle with this hair business. It sort of became epic in proportion. And I finally, have accepted that it's straight now, and I've never seen it straight or didn't growing up. But I'm starting to enjoy it. It's easier to take care of. It looks different. It feels different. And trying to lean into what that's like as opposed to being at war with it. Because being at war with it had me wanting to shave my head. And I suppose that would have been an option too. How sad that so many people have crippling body images issues to which their only solution is, I have got to look better. So there's always about an outside fix to an internal problem. And whenever you see that happening, you're in trouble. And somehow diving deeply into acceptance of whatever's going on with you, whether you are physically handicapped or you have something like fibromyalgia where you're in excruciating pain all the time, to really dive into that and accept that is probably one of the deepest, most profound spiritual callings there can be. Because we're constantly having to accept our ever-changing universe and our ever-changing bodies and faces and lives, but to face someday that we all aren't going to be able to move the way we used to, and sometimes prematurely, as in the case of Nikki, is an incredible spiritual calling, I think, and one that is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. But it seems to me that diving into it and leaning into it is where the information and the lessons and life lies. We're all built into bodies that have innumerable socially unacceptable realities like susceptible to illness, elimination, and deterioration, to name only a few. And what I see with people who struggle with intimacy issues is they can't tolerate their own bodily functions. And what happens in relationship to other people is that they very quickly are turned off by their partners. They don't like the way the person coughs or their body odors or something of that nature because they're actually self-rejecting of these things themselves. And intimacy is about being very close into bodily functions also, especially if you have infants and small children on your hands. So Kelly writes, anorexia related to starving yourself in order to look thin. Okay, I didn't know if you meant sexually anorexic. So yes, that is also a form of suffering, and it's also a form of what we call body dysmorphia, because people who are anorexic are not physically attractive to other people. The species is just not wired that way. When we see starvation, we actually have a feeling of fear or revulsion that comes up. We're typically in pain about it. And people, women especially, who starve themselves to the bone are not attractive to other people. And that's the distortion of that. And so we know that anorexia is in large part about control and power. And when you felt disempowered or controlled in your life, and this is the way that you've gone about getting it, again, it's a false sense of power and control, just like sex and love addiction are, just like drug abuse is. So to be able to start to give up those internal mechanisms by beginning to eat and allow your body to take the shape that it's going to take is a form of self-compassion and self-love. Starving yourself is an act of violence, and it's an act of violence against yourself and the people around you. It's sort of a perverted way of trying to create boundaries. So facing your codependence, facing your family of origin issues, also facing matters that involve the state your mother is when she was pregnant with you. If you had a mother who was starving herself or bulimic while she's carrying an infant, that infant is going to have eating problems because they're wired into the enteric nervous system, the organs, the nervous system that surrounds our organs, let's put it that way. And so it's not necessarily just your doing if you were wired that way, but as an adult, you have to work tenaciously against these tendencies and start to find ways of eating healthfully, embracing the food, being grateful for food, because food is not the enemy in anorexia any more than sex is the enemy when we talk about sex and love addiction. It's the abuse of the food. It's the abuse of the alcohol, the drugs, you name it. That's where the problem is. So look at the ways in which you are abusing the food or the behavior or the substance, not the thing itself. Let's see. So to deny any aspect of your actual body and functions is to cut yourself off from life and reality, not from your own, but from others as well. And I think that's sort of what I was just talking about. Cutting yourself off from reality is like creating walls instead of boundaries. And Pia Mellody talks about this a lot in her work on codependence and love addiction, that defending yourself behind a wall, cutting yourself off emotionally, not talking to people, those are not good boundaries. Those are somebody who cannot have good boundaries. A good boundary is saying to somebody, I don't like it when you talk to me that way, or I would like to see you, but every time I see you, you shame me and insult me, and it makes me not want to see you. So what are we going to do about that? That's a big conversation. Likewise, starving yourself to death is not the way to control people that you're angry at, whether it's a mother or a father or some other family member or a love interest. Eating healthfully and then letting those people know that they're invading your space or they invade your boundaries and that we need to change our relationship is a much better way of living, because then you're actually embracing your life. So I'm just looking to see where we are in the chats. Okay, somebody from Denmark says intimacy and body odor go hand in hand. It's true. I would say intimacy and sex. Sex is very messy business, and there are a lot of body odors and fluids and things of that nature, so it's true.
A listener asks,
self-projection about bodily functions is a helpful point. I have that issue with bowel movements, and I wish I could just accept that about myself. It drives me nuts. A lot of women feel this way, and it's sad. And it's true. And I would venture to say that this goes back to the most likely to the potty training years, when the mother is disgusted by or the mother has issues about her own bodily functions. That becomes a place of shame. So there's shame around the rectum, shame around elimination. There are people who are pee shy. They just can't stand it if somebody even hears them peeing. They can't even talk about it the way I'm talking about it. And all of this is a disconnection from our bodies. We are animals first and foremost. This is an organism, and we're animalistic. We just are. And we have to eat and we have to eliminate. And I think this seems really silly, but it just popped into my head that, there are books for children called Everybody Pees and Poops, and it might be worth getting those books to start to desensitize yourself as you read them, to notice the shame that comes up and to say to yourself, you know what, it's okay. Everybody does this. There's no one on the planet that doesn't pee or poop. They just don't. They would die if they didn't actually. Then you end up with a colostomy, or you end up some other sort of, colostomy bag is what you end up with. So again, would you rather have that or just have a healthy bowel movement and know that that means that your body is, digesting and eliminating well, and you're healthy? That's all bowel movement signifies, that you're actually a healthy human being. And in fact, there are practitioners who say that if you don't do that after every meal, imagine, you're technically constipated. So try to make friends with these bodily movements. Someone says, am I objectifying myself? I ask because the arousal triggers me and I may act out by seeking porn or other meaningless approval. So this matter of objectifying ourselves, I think, is an important one too, is that if you can't see yourself as a sexual being, then you're not going to feel sexy and you're not going to be able to sexually arouse another person because you're not owning your sexuality. But that's different than commodifying ourselves sexually. So if I'm only using my sex as a form of currency because I don't feel smart enough or pretty enough or sexy enough, and I know if I'm exhibitionistic and I put myself out there sexually, I'm going to get what I want from people, that's definitely in the realm of sexual addiction. That's a real objectification of myself because it's the only thing I am, in which case I'd probably have, rather large, breast implants and a facelift and dye my new straight hair blonde and, wear all kinds of signs and signals that are attractive to the opposite sex that say, hey, I'm available sexually. That is not what I'm talking about. I am talking about a healthy objectification, meaning that in recovery from sex addiction and people who were never sex addicts to begin with, you own your sexuality because you have boundaries around your sexuality. In sex addiction, your sexuality owns you. It's leaking out all the time. You're telegraphing that you're available sexually all the time because it's all you feel that you're worth. So it's good to make a distinction between those two things. So is the issue not your arousal, but the fact that you may have an addiction, and that's a possibility, certainly. I wonder if you can accept yourself without needing external approval. Perhaps you seek to get in shape in order to get external approval versus wanting that for your own health, an internal reward. Well, certainly, but human beings need validation. We need to be seen. We need to be in a feedback loop. So if I exercise because it's good for my cardiovascular health, it helps me stay fit and strong, and I feel good and better about myself, and I feel more sexual, more attracted to my partner, it keeps my marriage, my life happy, then that is sort of an aspiration for doing it. But if secondarily I have friends and family and my husband say, wow, you look really great, that makes me feel good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So we're talking about moderation, not extremes here. The person that I just mentioned who writes about boundaries in codependence is Pia Melody, and she has written several books on codependence. I can't spell it. And love addiction. So you can find her work on Amazon for sure if you just type in Pia Melody. Her book is Facing Love Addiction and Facing Codependence also. I have shame around my menstruation, and that, again, is something that is historically embedded for women. There are religions today that don't want women in places of worship because they're having their menstrual cycles, because they're, quote, dirty at that time of the month, which is really a tragedy because without menstruation, we don't have childbirth and cycles of life. So, again, if your body is clean, if you tend to yourself during your cycle, if you celebrate the fact that you are a woman and that this is part of the gift you have of giving life and receiving life, then there should be no shame about this part of your body. And I know I can say that to you and that's not going to change it for you, but I recommend that you take a look at some books about menstruation, moon cycles, and things of that nature. There's nothing that's popping into my head at this moment, but I would encourage you to just type in some search words on Amazon, and I bet you will find books about the beauty of menstruation and how to love that part of your body and that gift that you bring to the world. So someone says, when I'm in good shape and I look at my body in the mirror, I get aroused. How do I find a balance between loving my body and, quote, loving my body? Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at your body in the mirror and getting aroused. It's what you do with it that's problematic. If you decide you're going to have phone sex with a stranger because of it and you get caught in that loop, then you have a problem. But if it's arousing and it makes you want to bring that to your partner sexually, then I think that's a healthy form of one's personal sexuality. But again, when it's personal and it's private, then that is you owning your sexuality. When you make it public and exhibitionistic and you have to have validation from other people, that's when you become a slave to it. I've wondered about whether the shame around bowel movements originated with my mom's purity fixation, which is still alive and well. So I would guess that it does. And this is part of what gets encoded again, not just psychologically to the child, but neurobiologically. So into the autonomic system, into the body. So there's anxiety around bowel movements because I'm dirty or not clean. Whereas you would literally die if you didn't have a bowel movement over time. You'd have to go to the hospital. So you've got to look at even just the logic of it. Maybe that will help you start to get more into reality about self-acceptance. And, what goes in has to come out, and we take so many nutrients from the foods that we put in our bodies. So we're taking... If you have a juicer, for example, and you put vegetables in a juicer, you put these whole beautiful vegetables in the juicer, and what comes out is juice, and what gets eliminated is all this kind of freaky fiber. And it all is, it's just fibrous stuff that gets tossed away. So you have to think about a bowel movement in the same way. It's all going to come out. It's not going to smell that great, but it's got to come out. And there's nothing wrong about it or dirty or shameful about it. You're just a human being or a mammal or a reptile or any other living creature on the earth. Okay, I have impotency in like a relationship, but I'm terrified approaching the opposite sex. So that requires that you really get to the bottom of what the impotency is about. It depends on your age. It depends on your level of anxiety. It depends on your own body image and your shame about your body. So because, there's no way I can possibly direct you in a forum like this, I highly recommend that you see a therapist that can help you with these matters because, there are plenty of ways to have sex without having an erect penis. And getting past the shame of that, and again, in the acceptance of that, will free you enormously to be sexual. But you have to be clear about why you're impotent, what brings it on, what has brought it on, if this is a permanent state because of your age, or if this has more to do with psychological issues. And only then will you be able to engage someone to have a healthy sex life with. I dated a guy who was impotent, and what stood in the way most of the time was his focus on it instead of how we wanted to make love and express our love for each other. And I would say that's really beautiful feedback because we have tongues, we have fingers, we have other ways of stimulating one another. The penis is not the only game in town. But again, you have to get clear about what's going on with you, why you do what you do. What about cyber sex? Is that wrong? Well, I don't think any kind of sex is wrong if people are consensual and it doesn't involve innocence, children, people who cannot take care of themselves. So if you are having cyber sex activities with somebody that you feel is safe and healthy and it enhances your sexuality, then that's fine. Whenever anything becomes secretive, shaming, abusive, or secretive, shaming, or abusive to yourself or another person, it's likely in the addiction camp. What distinguished a healthy need for validation versus unhealthy? Well, I was just talking about that this morning to people in our intensive program, and it's when we are reliant upon it. When we become reliant on any one thing, then it's usually unhealthy unless, of course, we're disabled and we need that thing to keep us alive. So if I'm in a relationship with you and I need you to validate me constantly before I leave the house, how I look, how I sound, that I'm smart enough, that I'm okay, you're going to get really tired of that. And you're not going to be sexually aroused or turned on. You're going to start to get disgusted, actually. So that is probably a good clue. And we all have to get in touch with how needy we are. Neediness seems to be a dirty word in our world, that we're not supposed to be needy as adults. But we are. At times of vulnerability, we can be incredibly needy. We need a hug. We need somebody to bring us soup because we're sick and we can't get in the car and drive. We need somebody to tell us that we're on the right track with whatever we're doing, whether it's, work, something in our jobs or with one of our kids. Like, we constantly need some sort of mirroring and validation to let us know that we're okay in the world, because the human mind, and Dan Siegel talks about this, exists in a social context. There is no mind without a social context. There's a brain and there's a body, but the mind exists in the social context in which we're living. So we have to have feedback from one another. I'm trying to change my slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. Someone says, in practice, can you recommend something I can say verbally or internally to myself when I look at my naked body so I stay in healthy arousal? I think if you stay with, I love myself, and notice the tendency to go into fantasy, that should help you stay with your body and with your body parts in real time, as opposed to moving into some sexualized version of looking at your body, like dancing or masturbating or thinking that you're hot or something of that nature. But really to look in a certain way, and also, to have the lights on, so no candlelight, no music, nothing that's going to activate this way of sexualizing your body. And these are ways also. How can you show your body as much kindness and compassion as you might show an honored guest? So stop the messages that you hate any part of your body. Be kind to your body. If you have aches or pains or something of that nature, rather than being angry about it, be kind to yourself about it and say, wow, this is still troubling me or hurting me, and, I'm getting the therapy I need, or I'm doing the exercises I'm supposed to do, and boy, this is really, this is a long road for me. If you aim to grow your psychological capacity for healthy relationships, learning to love your body unconditionally is a good place to start. After all, you're rather attached to it. So this word unconditionally is a tricky word, because this word and all of these meditations are very clearly aspirations. And Tom and I have talked about this a lot, that when we wrote these meditations, it wasn't because we are so realized that we live our lives by these things every single day in perfection. We aspire to them, and we hope to inspire all of you to aspire to them also. So if your aspiration is to live, to have an unconditional love for your body, then that keeps the bar pretty high so that you don't perpetrate violence on yourself. Send love to your body. Promise to love, esteem, and care for your body in any condition at least as much as you love, esteem, and care for others in your lives. And women can be guilty of this because we're always tending to other people, but, we forget to tend to ourselves, whether it's, you haven't had a manicure in a couple months and you have hangnails, or you're not tending to, you're not shaving your legs or using body lotion, or the things that nourish the body that make you feel good about yourself. Also, dental care, dental hygiene, having medical exams in timely manners, all of that is about tending to your body too, so that you can allow your most loving energy to flow through your body today. Someone says that when I learned that growling tummies signified low blood sugar, a signal that the body needs nourishment, it was helpful. Then I learned that I could eat anything I wanted, but to stop when satisfied, not full. It was liberating eating that way, and exercising regularly left me satisfied enough with my 40-something body. And I would say hallelujah to you, Mary Jane. And it's true. We get into these crazy ideas that if we don't eat, we'll lose weight, as opposed to you're lowering your blood sugar, you're going to have a harder time losing weight. And eating to satisfaction, not feeling stuffed, is a great earmark for being healthy and not abusing your body with not enough food, too much food. And Mary Jane writes to Ignacio, how about this? This beautiful body is mine. I can choose to share it with someone I love, or I can share it with me, and that's lovely. How can you separate your identity from your body also? That, I am my body and I'm also not my body. And that's the paradox involved in what we're talking about and in all of life. It doesn't matter what form the body takes. Who you are, the spirit of who you are is what matters. And that's why I love watching that video by that young woman I told you about, Purdy, who lost her legs. And there's another aerial, she was a, what are those people called that jump off of mountains? Base jumper, and she is from the Netherlands, and I would encourage you to also look at that video. She also gave a TED Talk. I don't remember her name, but I think if you type in base jumper, she's got a remarkable story also of loss of her body and how she was able to re-engage her body. Can someone with poor sexual self-concept also be hurtful for someone who is loving their body? Oh, absolutely. I think when we are negative about our own bodies and our own lives, we can tend to tear somebody else down because we're feeling jealous or inadequate. So we have to be very careful about that, and that's why it's important that you do your internal personal work so that you love yourself and you're whole, so that when you come to a relationship, you're actually bringing something to it. You're not waiting for that person to make you feel better. So we talked about looking and noticing your reaction in a mirror. And does your body consciousness react like it's a being that's connected, present, and mature, or like an overly disciplined or neglected child? So this mirror exercise is very, very powerful for you as a feedback loop to how you actually see yourself. Ask your body consciousness how you may forge a meaningful connection to your body over time. So be in communication with your body. Don't be afraid of your body. So do we have any final questions? Because it's 12:50 on the dot here. This was a really fun interactive dialogue for me today. You all had a lot of great questions. I hope that this leaves you today with a message to, if you remember for the rest of the day, for your prayer to be, I love my body. In silence, as you walk through the rest of your day and evening, say it as many times as you can. Make it your affirmation for the next week or the next month. I love my body. I love who I am. And just notice what shifts start to take place in that time. So thank you for that. I love all of you, and I love all of your bodies, and I look forward to seeing you in October. Bye-bye.